Mick, please.
I'm just, one of the points where we did start this whole project was I was questioning the wide currency of this term openness, that projects are open, undertakings are open, and I saw in it an attempt to disavow something of the positionality that you speak of, that somehow there's a, I see openness and espousing openness as a virtue or as a characteristic, as its pervasiveness and its the resonance that the term has and sets up. It just seems to disavow so much about the fact that we are caught up in a world of various kinds, a transactional world. But on the other hand, what I was interested in was not so much the desire to escape a transactional world, but rather the ambition to do it otherwise, the ambition to so I kind of feel the possibility that, I'll put it a different way, one of the key things I think that's emerging to differentiate a number of initiatives is the question of duration. That where duration is not pre-specified, where there's the possibility of an extended engagement, then I think sometimes something happens, or potentially happens, which is that positionality becomes fluid, that the transactions that we enter into potentially modify the positions we're in, which is not necessarily the virtuosity of becoming better people or something like that, but rather the possibility of ourselves being with ourselves otherwise. And I think there's something in that, but I think part of what's in that is that we might find ourselves monsters as much as gods, you know. And I think there's something about the dominance of a consensus world which is so much about the disavowal of agency. We forfeit so much agency. Our educational systems are about teaching us to disavow and let go of agency. That's what they do. They take us through incredible losses of agency. And I think that something here that might reconnect us with notions of agency as the precondition of a politics, not as bringing with them a particular political position, but agency bringing with it instability and dissensus and all the scariness that goes with that. And I... Shut up, Nick.
No, please. Yeah, sure. I was just about to do that, but you were faster than...
In relation to what Mick said, I would like to ask a question, and one of them is maybe something that is a personal hookup, and the other one relates to the Dutch context. And maybe I'll start with the one that relates to the Dutch context, because I think that maybe, and there's enough people in the room to contest this, that the current Dutch educational system provokes or puts too much importance on this notion of personal agency, and actually privileges the idea of opinion over knowledge, and the idea that every individual kind of voice is more important than received knowledge. So I think at least for the Dutch context, that would be your statement would have to be somehow reversed, or in my opinion. But the other question is more general, is that, or something that I, of course, very much enjoyed reading the book as we published it, but I could still be it's kind of an obligation I had. No, but I really enjoyed it genuinely. But one of the things I thought was interesting that was not addressed by any of the writers in the book was this idea of maybe the inherent closedness of the use of educational formats within the field of visual arts. Meaning that maybe an exhibition is a more participatory kind of event and a more easy event than, let's say, a visual art type of event that uses an educational format. Maybe that, or I'm not being very clear, I'm being circular, but maybe that let's say that
there's a romanticism, you say, about certain educational forms.
Well, about the openness of educational form, or the use of educational forms, I think is partially a fiction. Because I think we first have to educate people how to participate, and then you can actually make that openness and participation happen. And I feel very often that let's say that the use of educational format excludes a larger number of people than actually includes them, and that this whole idea of them being more participatory is actually is partially a myth or an illusion. I knew you would. It's just like, yeah, I can't shut up. But anyway, I mean, I was thinking a lot about this today, and it's absolutely true. It's such a problematic term, and again, this, you know, to talk about this open optimism of kind of a notion of discursivity or education is completely problematic. I can only talk about the struggles and the kind of things that I've been trying to do, and one of them has been working with this institution called If I Can't Dance, and it's exactly that sort of problematic that we've been trying to address, the complete danger of displacing the specificity of art practice with a kind of discourse. So there's been a real importance in inviting artists to work for 2 years specifically on projects that are not linguistic, that are not, you know, they are what they are, which is their specific expertise and practice. There is the attempt to place those moments of display in larger institutions where absolutely there is a shared experience or there's an individual experience. The exhibition is a known format where people can kind of address it, or performance festival, performance event. But there is a huge importance that we've tried to bring up within our own experience of trying to figure shit out ourselves, you know, assuming that as curators we're not the sort of distributors of knowledge, but actually that what I mean by an intellectual experience on that level is not a claim of authorship, but rather that there's a lot of interesting stuff to kind of figure out around particular things, and and that's not to disavow the power of making those moments of display, but to suggest that there are other structures too. So while we address, I hope, or attempt to address certain remits that are, you know, absolutely not new and very standard and very classic, a really important part of what we've also tried to do over the last 5 years is have consistent reading groups, which are exploratory, which have now ended up in outputs of books, but sometimes not, you know, and they've kind of, you know, been, what I mean by precarious is that kind of moment of U-turns, of delicacy, of collapsing, of regenerating themselves, things that are not kind of necessarily sustainable or answerable or hypervisible. But ultimately, in terms of a kind of, there is another participation, and it's just a suggestion that there are several other spaces too, I suppose. And so I'm not necessarily trying to advocate alternatives, but rather extras, maybe.
Thank you. I think Anne already launched the questions of the public, so please, are there any questions, remarks, questions for clarifications from the audience?